Well, folks, welcome to another episode of the Noble Man Podcast. We're here in the Noble Warriors office again at the conference table, and I have as my special guest today, Pastor George Siler. And George is a pastor at our home church at Parkway Baptist Church now. He's a pastor of discipleship and missions, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many other titles do you have?
That's all I want. That's enough.
Now, you came out of another assignment.
Yes.
Because you wanted to be back in the local church. You felt like a calling back to the local church. So talk about that transition and your love for the church.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a neat pilgrimage. You know, first I was called to ministry in the local church and very thankful for, wow, the way God spoke to me through, especially through some men in my life that were, you know, I didn't have just one dad. I had like four. That's a whole nother story to talk about. But I cut my teeth in ministry in the local church, loved it, and then I had the opportunity to step into, at various points along the way, into denominational ministry, and one of those was through a program called World Changers, which allowed me to mobilize young people, their leaders, their churches in mission trips all over America, and then eventually it became all over the world, and then had a chance to come here to Richmond to work with the International Mission Board and do what they call International World Changers, which was sending students and their leaders all over the world and helping to also cultivate the next generation of missionaries. But as wonderful as that was, I just undoubtedly what a amazing job and sweet thing that was. Underneath it all was just this desire to still not be so disconnected from the front lines, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know, you're sending other people to do things. You're helping equip them, but when it gets down to it, you know, you're still behind a desk and often in a computer, on a phone, or whatever, even with the travel I did. So when the time came to retire from IB, you know, the opportunity to serve at our church at Parkway just sort of popped up, and I just said, yes, this is my next step. I want to get back into it. My love is to be with people and to have a chance to do something there in the local church.
And you came out of the blocks at this was not a stand-up start like you're running a marathon or a 2-mile race. This was out of the blocks, sprinting, jumping over hurdles, and man, you
that's what it looks like to you. I'm not the young whippersnapper I was. I mean, you know, we all, as we get older, we all think of ourselves still in terms of, well, I'm a young person, right? But then you look in the mirror and go, who is that? You know, and who's that old guy? But so I've had to kind of measure my steps a little bit more. But here's the thing. Being at this point in my life, one of the neat things about this was returning back to the local church for me was, it was different this time because I think I go back and I think of those early years and I had a lot to prove. You know, I felt the need to validate myself. And I don't mean that to be too selfish, but it's just, you know, let's be honest with ourselves. So much of what motivates us is we want to make a difference, but we're big on what does that mean to me. Now I'm at a point where I go, hey, I don't have to prove anything. I just want to just steward things well. Yeah. And so it's not about, hey, can I make my mark? Can I accomplish something significant? It's more like, you know, I've got these few years. What am I going to do with them? How am I going to run the gun lap, as they often say? You know, or the fourth quarter. How do you do this well? But at this age, you kind of have to measure your steps, take a breath, and you know. You're not racing, you're plotting, but that's okay. Yeah.
Oh, well, recently I've seen hats and flags. I think, who was it? Was it Carey, Jim Carey, not Jim Carey, William Carey, who said, I can plod. Are you familiar with that term?
Well, you know, talk about someone who had endurance. Holy cow.
Yes.
This was a guy that put his, you know, shoulder to the grindstone and didn't see fruit in his ministry over there in India and Burma for a long, long time. Right. So, and yet God rewarded that over time. He did.
Yeah. And so I've just been seeing these things that say, I can plod, and it's a reference to his steady plodding to see the Lord work over decades.
Yeah.
So you had reached out to me to have a conversation about mentoring, and you and I have talked quite a bit over the years and the months about intergenerational discipleship, and my focus is always on men. So I said, well, if George is coming in and we're going to talk about this, man, let's turn it into a podcast conversation because I think there are others that can benefit from that. So tell me, you've spent most of your career, because you were a student pastor, and you guys started doing local missions and ministry, and that's what kind of got the attention of folks and became world changers and then internet. I mean, that kind of grew out of your investment in young people. So this has really characterized your entire ministry career as investing in younger generations. Is that correct?
Well, actually, let me shape that a little bit, because for me, the experience of calling has been most definitive. I mean, wow. My early years in college, I was with a group of guys that we got active in our church. Our minister of what was called recreation in those days kind of put us under his wing, and he called us his young Timothys.
Wow.
And so he did invest in us. And so out of that, God just began to reveal a real strong sense of calling to the ministry. Now, I'll be honest, it was all over the place. I really didn't know for sure what all this would mean. I had my own ideas of what being in the ministry would be, but over time, God was so faithful to me. But out of that experience, I went to seminary. I had a chance to work in centrifuge camps when they first started, and then I had a chance to be in my churches in several churches along the way. But in all that, I began to really gravitate toward the idea of what does it mean to be called, because for me, it gave me this incredibly strong sense of purpose in life. It gave so much meaning. You know, we talk about how if you love your job, you never work a day in your life. Well, when you're called, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's not to say you don't have bad days. It's not to say that it doesn't get tough at times. But man, calling is this beautiful thing. And I thought, is it just for a few? And I know that's not the purpose of our conversation today, but it fits into this, because if the truth is that God has a calling for each of us, that changes everything.
Right.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
And so if you start with that, that whole proposition, I should say, then you begin to work backward from that and goes, what is the implications for that? And so investing in the lives of young people, which is what I did, along the way, and has continued to be a heartbeat for me, is the whole idea of, man, if you can get this right now, you've got a lifetime ahead of you of faithful service and of meaning and purpose that you'll never regret. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to help people get there.
Yeah. And so that became all of your working out of your calling manifested itself in these ways, in this focus on investing in the next generation.
And when you're in ministry, and especially when you work with young people, you're always looking for the silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
What is it that's going to catch their imagination? What's going to wake them up? Wow, for a while I thought it was, Bible study, and that is important. Oh, please don't hear me, denigrate that at all. But it just, for some it worked, for many it didn't, and it was just I'm looking. Let's take them to camp. So we put a whole week of camp into their lives and watch that be so transformative for so many young people, and that's true. But even that had its shortcomings. Then it became a mission trip. And so that's kind of what drove me into missions is again, and so I would take young people on a mission trip and watch their lives change as they encounter, especially God at work in other cultures, and recognizing the power of prayer and the need for the gospel and what lostness looks like and all that. But the reality under all that was, why am I here? You know what I mean? Like even with missions, it's not a silver bullet. The real deal is what if you catch a vision of what God really is up to, and you want to be a part of that? That's what the mission is joining God in what he's doing in the world and recognizing his heart and wanting that in your own life.
Yeah. And so then how is that translated? I mean, if we're going to have, you said, hey, let's have a conversation about mentoring. What are you seeing in the church where we are maybe missing the opportunity to help people have that revelation or experience that closeness to Christ or get close enough to hear a call in their own life? So what role does mentoring or intergenerational engagement, Titus 2 sort of ministry, what role does that play in that whole thing?
Well, in this context today especially, I think we're operating in a huge deficit. Yeah. So many of our young people, and when I say young people, I'm one of the old guys, right? So just anybody younger than me, right? But so many folks have come through a life that's filled with a lot of worries and anxieties and struggles and brokenness. We know how many folks have come through a situation where there was divorce in their family, or there was no father in the family, or whatever. You know, a lot of people are not being raised in church anymore, and so there's just tremendous barriers that they face. And so when they're in the church, so often, you know, there's a lot of encouragement that's needed. There's a lot of grace that's needed in their lives, and I think that's a starting point, because you know, I would say that was me. You know, the men that invested in me recognized I was growing up without a dad, that there was some things, key pieces missing in my life. And so they just found ways to invest in me. You know, I want you to do this work with me. I want you to do this job, and you can do this, George. You know, and they gave me confidence to move forward in life. So, you know, a part of what I needed to do was to do the pay it forward thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, somebody invested in me, I need to be able to do that. Now, the question is, as we talk about mentoring and what that looks like in the church, you know, the question is, has anybody done that for you yet? And the answer for a lot of people is no. Yeah. Nobody's ever really invested in me. Nobody's
and for
really...
adults, I mean, I have conversation with adults at our church. I mean, you're probably having the same ones who say, you know, I don't know that I could do this for someone else because I've never had it done for me, and I don't know what it feels like or looks like.
And we can beat that. Yeah. We don't have to let that be the defining thing, but there is a principle here: is you can't give something that you haven't received. Right. You know, if you've not received enough grace in your life and validation and encouragement and correction and all those things that go with mentoring, then it's kind of hard to turn around and give that to somebody else, because you're operating, again, in some sort of deficit in your own life. So we've got to correct that first. But the good news is you don't have to stay there. Right. You know what I mean? I think some people feel like they've let their lives be defined by what they didn't have. Yeah. They're letting their lives be defined by some form of brokenness. Well, hey, everybody has got brokenness. You know what I mean? And here's the beautiful thing in the scriptures that Jesus teaches us is, I work through broken people. Mm-hmm. In fact, I do my best work. That's right. Let's just pick any character in the Bible and go, okay, do you see this as a perfect person, or do you see this as a broken person that God lifted up and go, don't worry, I'm going to put you to work. You know, and just pick one. Yep. You know, Moses, we think, oh, what an awesome guy, but he's a murderer. Yeah. He was, you know, he took matters into his own hands. He jump-started things that he shouldn't have done, and now he's in the wilderness for 40 years, doing nothing but shepherding sheep in the backside of nowhere. And I imagine he's out there going, I guess I blew it. Yeah. You know, God says, no, I got you. You're exactly where I want you to be. We'll work with this. Don't worry about that. And then the rest is history, right? Yeah. Well, you know, you've heard me talk about Point Man. I love the book Point Man, and I listen, even though Steve Farrar has passed away, I still listen to a lot of Steve Farrar sermons. And this week, twice I've listened to his message on depression. Oh. And in that, he talks about a time in his early 30s when he was depressed, and part of what he says is that God works sovereignly, strangely, and slowly in our lives. And part of the reason he tells that whole story in this is because he says everything that God is taking you through, he's not only teaching you, but he's giving you a gift that then you have an opportunity to give to someone else. Yeah. And so that's part of this, is how do you use that for kingdom benefit? Mm-hmm. And so that's part of what you're talking about here, is everyone has something that they can invest in someone behind them or someone near them. They do, but that's hard-won wisdom. Yes. And so it's interesting. This came out of the psychological world, but it's called shipwreck. Mm. But it's in the scriptures. Yeah. It's the idea that at some point in life, you're going to go through shipwreck. Yeah. I mean, it's just, if you haven't had it already, don't worry, it's coming. Yeah. You know what I mean? So what is shipwreck? It means you've lost a dream. It means you've lost opportunity. It means somebody, betrayed you, right, or you've been left out, or any number of things that just, arrest you in the direction you've been going. Now you're stuck. Now you're broken. You're upset. You don't know what way to turn. And it's in the shipwreck that God says, this is where I do my work. Yeah. Because not to say that what was before was wrong, but it's not until we go through some form of suffering that we begin to discover who we really are. Right. So in the whole idea of identity development, which I spent a lot of time processing, almost everybody that knows anything about identity development will tell you, until you've gone through struggle, you don't really know who you are. Yeah. Until you've gone through a test Well, that's what that shipwreck often represents for people. So some people get stuck in that, and they go, that's it. I'm done.
And that becomes their identity. Their identity is their brokenness.
And they don't realize that, no, this could be the doorway to something beautiful.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that validates the fact that you went through suffering. We're not going to sit around here and say, suffering's awesome, it's great. No. But we're going to say that with God, suffering is valuable.
Yeah.
That it's something he uses in our lives. And we get that from watching Jesus himself. I mean, what has he accomplished? The greatest good in the world by the hugest amount of suffering. And there's no way he could have done it without suffering.
That's right. Is there any other way, God?
Yeah, I wish.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah.
I've dealt with loss in my own life here, and just a few years ago, losing my wife, Betty, and I can just tell you, that's shipwreck.
Yeah.
41 years together, what do you do? How do you go forward? All your bucket list is blown up, and you can sit there and there is a time to grieve.
Yeah.
There is a time to struggle with the pain and loss, and we're not trying to diminish that at all.
Right.
But then there comes a moment where you go, okay, is this going to be all I do? Is this where I stop, or is this where I just sort of go, shrug my shoulders and go, well, that's it,
Yeah.
Or do I say, I'm still here for a purpose? How does God want to use this in my life?
Yeah.
That's how we move forward.
And we must do that, because if we don't, we're not being good stewards of what God has brought us through. And so what would it look like? You're pastor of discipleship, pastor of missions. What ideally would it look like for a church that embraces this well, and where we see it happening, and we see that the kingdom is advancing because we're taking advantage of maybe the learning experiences of everyone? And paint a picture for me, George, of what that looks
that's
like.
exactly where we are right now. Because, now I know this is not everything in a church's ministry, but, as you know, we've been working toward developing a very, very intentional one-on-one, or at least, a mentoring discipleship approach for our church. So we have corporate worship, which is so important. We call that one of the wings of the plane. You got to worship together on a regular basis every week, right? But the other side of that, we use small groups. That's where people get into community and study the Bible together and get to know each other and pray for each other. So that's the other wing of the plane. And I'm kind of like, I thought that was it. And then I realized that a component we're missing. We talk about a lot, and it happens sporadically, but the idea of mentoring is where you get deep, one-on-one or one-on-two, and that's almost like the rudder, the tail of the plane that steers things, right? So it's that other component, if you use that analogy. So we're rolling this thing out, and it's nothing new. We're not inventing anything. Church has been doing this for forever, right? But we just decided we've talked enough about it. Let's be intentional. So what does it look like to ask people to go through a basic discipleship program where someone's going to walk them through the basics? Someone's going to make sure. Let's talk about your assurance of salvation. Someone's going to talk them through, are you comfortable reading the Word of God and studying it for yourself? What do you know about prayer? How's that going in your life? And just step by step by step. Now, I know that all these are basics. None of this is rocket science, okay? Yep. But it's like we said, we've had so many people say, well, I've been in church all my life, but nobody's ever really asked me these probing questions like, how are your relationships?
Yeah.
Do you still have broken relationships that, one of the things about being a disciple of Christ is you're not allowed to leave it that way.
Right.
You may not be able to change what the other person is, but you have to deal with that brokenness and do all that you can to bring redemption into your relationships, right? Well, sometimes that takes somebody walking with you through that. Let me pray with you through that. So I'm excited about us doing this. It's kind of like a 12-week, 12-session kind of thing. So we kind of put our own material together. Tons of good resources already out there. Yeah. It's just, let's do it. Yeah. And so here's the cool thing is we're rolling that out. And I was nervous. I was about to chew my fingernails a little bit. Can I get enough adult mentors to do this? Because when, like you said earlier, when we started, people go, oh, I can't do that. Yeah. Oh, I can't do that. You know what I mean? Well, here's the cool thing. I've had a dozen people go, I'm ready to do this. And they've never done it before. Yeah. They've not ever done this, but they're ready to take this journey. And there's an excitement about it. And then the other side of that is God supplying those folks that say, you know what, I've never been through, I need this. And these are adults. These are not just, now I definitely think this is crucial to do with our young people. But we're kind of catching up with ourselves because in the church we've got a ton of folks that have been there and been sitting in the pews or whatever, but there's just not been an intentional effort to walk them through this and say, let's make sure you've got the tools you need to grow as a disciple of Christ.
So let me ask you this, just because my background and my passion, my drive. Of that 12 that have raised their hand and said yes, what's the ratio of men to women?
It's half and half.
Is it?
It really is.
Awesome. I'm encouraged
In fact,
to hear that because I'm a little surprised.
I had to go after the women because
Did you really?
I did. But you know what? That's a credit to you because we've got a culture in our church that says men step up.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about that.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? It was the older women that were going, I don't know, and I'm like, it's got to be the same gender. I mean, we just can't do this.
You can't do that differently.
I have no business trying to lead a lady or a young lady. You know what I mean? In these deep discussions. I mean, I can teach a Bible study with everybody in it, right? But it's just there's just so much that needs to happen in that.
And that becomes a more intimate conversation that needs to happen. That needs to be same sex.
Yep.
So in this, what's the difference? Because what you're defining here sounds like we're teaching spiritual disciplines and core doctrines of the faith. What's the difference between this mentoring project and discipleship?
Well, I'm not sure I would. Let me put it to you this way: I didn't want to do this on my own. I've been around.
Yeah.
And one of the things you learn is you don't do anything by yourself. You gather a group and go, let's do this together.
Were you like that when you were young?
Well, let's just not go there. I mean, I did pull people in, but let's just say I've improved quite a bit. So I had this fantastic team of adult men and women that were working with me. And so several things as we talked bubbled up. One was, this has got to be relational. This can't just be informational.
Yeah.
Like we're not just churning out, learn this, learn this, learn this. Okay, good. Here's the stamp of approval. You're ready to move on. No, this has got to be relational. The other side of it is they said was, this cannot be a finishing school. It's got to be a starting place.
Right.
So when we talk about discipleship, so often, sometimes a program or a resource comes across as, if you'll do this, you're done.
Yeah.
You've been through confirmation. You're finished. You can relax now. No. This is all about launching.
Right.
And so those are two. And the other third big thing they talked about is, this better have the Bible in it. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but we can create all these other resources that talk about the Bible, but it's the Bible that changes people.
Right.
God has ordained His Word to be what renews our mind and corrects us and instructs us and challenges us, right? And so I just said, there's a lot to talk about, but man, every session we're going to get in the Word. Yeah. And so I think that's what's going to challenge people the most is you go, okay, you're going to get one-on-one, and together y'all going to work through Romans 12, 1 and 2 together. Mm-hmm. And there's no preacher telling you exactly what to say. You're going to get into the Word. But isn't that what we need to do?
Yeah.
And that, so I get excited about that aspect as much as anything is because I've done that over the years. I've watched how, let's look at the Word together, and especially with a young man, and he's, stumbling through, reading the text with me, and then I'll just start going, okay, what do you see here? And I start asking some very simple questions. And invariably, I'll be honest, I'll be a little bit disappointed, how lack of insight. But part of it is people just haven't been taught to think. Yeah. They got it. They're smart. It's just when it comes to Christian life and the Bible, they shut down because it's always been, sit there, shut up, I'll tell you what to think.
We've got generations of folks that's been their experience of church. They're consumers. We've trained them that way rather than train them to be producers in the kingdom.
And that's been a pet peeve for me. Because I grew up in when I did go to church as a kid, I remember sitting in Sunday school class being bored out of my mind. Yeah. I can just see it in my, being in a classroom and someone droning on, and just nothing resonates, right? And part of it was just because there was no engagement. Yeah. But part of that was we didn't understand what it means to teach.
Right, because that's a delivery model, not an interactive discovery model of education.
And it's look at how Jesus taught. I mean, It didn't just sit there and lecture. Sometimes he'd throw a question at you, and especially he'd throw out stories. Yeah. And just stir the pot and go. His disciples go, "What did you mean by that?" And they're leaning in, and that's what we want in any kind of discipleship. Is I want people to lean in and go, "Wait a minute, stop the train. You just raised a question. I'm not sure. I've never had anybody ask me that before." Yeah.
Oh, it's glorious when that happens. I mean, I got a fun story to tell you. So on Friday mornings, this morning, we're recording this on a Friday, I meet with 4 young dads at Panera. And so we're going through the New Testament together this year, five chapters a week. So this week, we were talking about chapters 4 through 8 of Acts. And one guy came to the table, he said, man, the beginning of this chapter 5, just, I'm not sure what to do with Ananias and Sapphira. I mean, these people died because, and so we unpacked that, and what does that mean? And, you know, nobody's fallen over dead when they just pass a collection plate on. So what does it mean in today's, great around that. And so we just dug into the scripture together. But the coolest part, I think, was that same guy said, you know, I read this about Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, and Philip came running alongside that chariot and said, what are you reading? And the guy told him, and then he said, well, how can I understand unless someone teaches me? And this young man said, I thought about this group and the value of this as I read that story there. And so, man, it's so common for people to read the Bible and have no understanding of how to apply it or where it fits into other pieces. And so we've got to mobilize the people who have that knowledge, even if it's not huge. It doesn't have to be a seminary education.
Well, Mike, let me just tell you, you're illustrating and demonstrating something right now, and you don't even realize it. It's called passion. You have a passion.
Oh, man.
You have a passion for the Word of God. You have a passion for people, for men and their families. And so that just, and I'm not saying that our world is passionless, but, you know, we've seen passion take our folks in all kinds of directions, but not toward the Lord.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things we're seeing about in this new generation, younger generations, is they're eager to find passion.
Yeah.
They're hungry for it. And when they see it in someone who's passionate about the Lord, they're just fascinated by that because, and I'm not saying there's a void out there, but I just feel like this is a big need today. And so one of the joys I have, like you, is to bring a sense of passion to it, whatever it is I'm doing with a young person, someone I'm mentoring is I just can't help it. If we get into the Word, I remember discovering this truth for myself and how it just went, oh my gosh, I had revolutionized my thinking, or I felt like God was speaking directly to me, and I just want them to have that experience. Right. And once they get that taste, they're hooked. I mean, I got to do this again. Yeah. And I go, this is not me. This is the Word of God.
Oh, it's
not like, oh, you have to meet with George or else you'll never have this experience again. I'm like, no, that's ridiculous. No, what gave me this passion in the first place? I'm coming to the Word of God. I'm going, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. This is so cool. Don't touch the ark, you'll die. Whatever. There's just so many good things that there. And so when somebody discovers that, they can't help but want to pass that on to other people.
And that has to be part of our prayer. If we're investing in other folks, and that was my goal with these guys. I had taken them through a book study, and then we went through Point Man, then we went through the book of James together, and I was wrestling with what do I do next? Because a lot of times I'll just cut guys loose and I'll go find another group of guys. And I was praying right before Christmas. I don't know, have I told you this story? And I said, God, what do I do with these guys? And I was reading my Bible, and I said, you know what? I love the Word. And it would be awesome for me to invest enough time in these guys for them to love the Word. And so I said, well, what should I do? And I'd really love for them to read the whole Bible, for us to read the whole Bible together. And I said, I just don't think they'll sign up for that right now. So I said, I'll tell you what, guys, I met with them and I said, I'd love to read the New Testament with you in 2026. 5 chapters a week, you read the whole New Testament, so that's what we're doing. And then in 2027, we'll read the whole Bible together. We'll read the chronological Bible and read the whole Bible together, meet every week and talk about what we read. Now, there's big chunks of it, but I didn't know. I figured they'd tuck tail and run. These guys leaned in and said, man, if you'll run with us for 2 years, we're running with you.
That's cool.
And so it's a huge investment.
Yeah.
But I told them, I said, I expect you to go and do this in the lives of some other men, because I'm investing in faithful men who will teach others also.
Well, let's be clear. We don't want to make this sound like it's some huge thing that, and I get none of us is a guru. I mean, the last thing I want to be is a guru. I want to be somebody who walks alongside of you. But here's the thing. One of our young men is a first responder. Yeah. And he's been in a situation where he's in the fire department, and he's on shift, and he's trying to inject his faith into that arena, and it can be difficult. It's a lot like being in the military. You know what I mean? But he prays at meals, and he prays openly. He tends to, when there's guys are talking about something, he'll inject a question here and there that kind of tries to lean toward the spiritual things, and it's starting to work.
Yeah.
And so he's been having these gospel conversations with his fellow firefighters.
Yeah.
And some of them saying, I want to get into this. So he calls me and he goes, how do I do this? What do I do with the Bible? I said, hey, chill, it's okay.
Yeah.
How about going through the book of Mark?
Yep.
Let's just introduce them to Jesus.
Short gospel,
just
quick,
show
rapid,
them Jesus.
Yep.
And this is what missionaries do all the time. They don't have a ton, many times they're in a context where they can't come in with all these resources and something that's hard to reproduce in that culture. So they just said, let's get a Bible out and we're just going to walk through passage by passage. We're going to work our way. And a lot of times they start with in the book of Mark because they want, let's just meet Jesus.
Yeah.
I said, if you meet Jesus, and if you aren't astounded and changed by that, then I don't know what else I can do for you. You know what I mean? And so I've given him a resource, but it's okay. It's like, I've given him Tim Keller's book on the kingdom, that's a walk through the book of Mark. But the only reason I gave that to him is just say, I want you to be fascinated with what you learn about Jesus and then let them. And so we looked at the very first few passages. It talks about why would Jesus need John the Baptist to be a forerunner? What's that forerunner say? And he goes, it's time to get yourself ready. Yeah. Something big's coming. Yeah. And, that's your signal that Jesus is no ordinary teacher, rabbi. He's the real deal. So that should set you up for what's coming in the rest of this book because, if you're a famous emperor, you've got forerunners. Yeah. If you're somebody important, there's always someone running ahead of you.
You've got a son who was in the military. My son, they call it a quartering party. Someone's going ahead of you to make sure that the path is ready and the people you need to meet, you don't have to wait for. They don't have to wait for you.
Well, everybody gets, that's right there. I mean, that's not a Bible study in the sense of, I need to pull out, some major resource. Let's just read the scripture. Yeah. I said, your job, though, is to not let them off the hook. You're going to go, we're going to read this, and you're going to say, what do you learn about Jesus in this? What do you learn about Jesus? And when you do that, that's going to take it. That's going to take care of things. So mentoring
becomes a curriculum.
Can be a curriculum. It should, that's what we're doing, right? But it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that complicated. We just want to get, some people are more ready than others to get into the Word of God, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah. And so it becomes about life, application of Bible to life, and being willing to walk with someone through what that looks like.
Yeah. If it's about me trying to change you, well, that's hopeless.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of counseling is. Mm-hmm. A lot of counseling is, one human being trying to change another human being, And I'm not saying that's all there is to counseling, but I'm just saying that's doomed because I can't help you. But when God speaks to you, God starts dealing with you.
That's transformational.
Oh, it's absolutely transformational. Right. So my goal is to introduce you to the one who can be the great counselor, the one who can be the one who leads you and speaks. And so when he speaks, man, you've got to deal with that. Yeah. With me, you can take it or leave it. So that's why, again, it's not for us to be a guru. Yeah. It's for us to be the person that says, let me introduce you to someone. Let me be a representative, but I want you to get to know him. I want you to walk with him.
Well, and so here's another piece that I have learned in this, that when I'm leading in a scenario like that or serving as a mentor, I learn as much or more about myself. And so if you go into this thinking that I'm just, someone else is going to be changed and God's going to use me to do it, well, brother, buckle your belt up, because when you do that well and rightly, you're going to be transformed because you're going to see things that you've never seen. And part of what's so cool is when people ask questions that I've never thought of, because they're reading the Bible with fresh eyes. It just is.
Well, here is a key to a situation we find a lot. We've got older Christians or people who have been believers for a long time, and they're just sort of stagnant in their faith. And you got to go, what's the reason? It's not like you need to learn more. Right. It's not like there's this level of discipleship, then there's being a super disciple, which means all this other stuff that other people know. No. The key to a robust Christian life is to be a channel of God's blessing. Yeah. It's like what is flowing through you. And if there's nothing flowing through you, it's kind of, That's where the word stagnant really takes reality. We talk about the Dead Sea Christian, which is someone who everything comes into you, but nothing's going out. But Jesus made it very clear, he who comes to me, out of him will flow rivers of living water. I'm like, I like that. I'd love to be that. So when it comes to mentoring and discipling other people, you're going to be blessed because you're becoming that channel of God's blessing to someone else. Whatever that looks like, you can't help but grow.
Yeah.
And be so. For me, I love all kinds of people, but I especially love my opportunity to be with our young adults because, first of all, they put up with me, which is pretty cool. And I'm not freaking them out by being the old guy in the room. Yeah. But more than anything else is just, can I bless you somehow? Yeah. Can I encourage you somehow? Because I remember being where you were, and probably the message I needed to hear the most in those days of my life was not all this information, but was just, you're okay. God's got you. Yeah. You can trust that the Lord is at work in your life. You don't have all the answers. I didn't have all the answers. But I will tell you this, the record I have of my experience with God is you can trust Him. Yeah. Hang in there. Yeah. Walk with Him. Abide with Him, and it's going to take care of you. Yeah. So along that line, I just have to say one other thing that's so important, I think, about mentoring is the idea of grace. My son is so good at this. My son has a family of 3 girls, and that's a lot of drama by his own admission, but it's a beautiful thing. One of his daughters is a diabetic, so that's a constant thing that they're having to stay on top of. But he has learned far better than me what it means to have a grace-filled home. Wow. What it means to exude grace and to offer it. Here's the thing, so often we think in Christianity that we need to kind of lower the boom on people. We need to create the guilt. We need to make sure they understand how bad they are, and their sin and how much they need fixing and all that. Well, the truth is people already know that. They already know that. They don't need more guilt on their lives. They don't need you to kind of remind them. Now, sometimes we have to at least acknowledge those things, right? To start, sometimes people don't want to even face those facts. But for the most part, our ministry and discipleship and mentoring is not so much about, let's fix you or whatever, but let's start with a place of grace. So here's something he told me yesterday. Little Ruby, 6 years old, got into her mama's jewelry box. And she got into some of the heirloom jewelry that she has, some gold necklace, gold earrings that had been handed down through the family. And so she brought those out, and curious Ruby, she's into everything. Nothing escapes her, right? I love it. And so she brings that dad and says, Dad, look at this. He goes, oh, honey, that's your mom's gold jewelry. That's valuable stuff. This is not something we play with, right? And she goes, oh, and so they take it back, and she goes, I think I lost an earring. And she begins to weep and wail and cry because it dawns on her she's really messed up. And Jonathan is going, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Look, don't worry. It's relax. Well, and sure enough, they found it. Yep. It was just right there where she had dropped it or whatever, and they put things back. Her mom comes home, and they tell Ada about the jewelry. Yeah. And he goes, that old stuff? Oh, what am I doing? I don't wear gold. I'm never going to wear that stuff. We ought to just trade that stuff in and get some costume jewelry that the girls really like that they'll want to wear. Yeah. And so out of that comes this grace-filled moment where, okay, Ruby was into something she wasn't supposed to be into, but out of it came something beautiful. Yeah. And if you'd have come at that, he said, Dad, I could have fussed at her.
Oh, he could have blown that up.
What were you doing? You crazy thing. Don't touch that stuff. Blah, blah. And I'm not saying that we live in this attitude of absolute permissiveness, but I'm just saying to apply this to where we are, I find a lot of folks just need me to exude grace. Yeah. To start with, because that's what Jesus comes with. Does Jesus come in with guns blazing and tell us, you bunch of rotten sinners, I'm here to save you, and you, boy, howdy, you better be thankful. Is that the way he comes at it? Or does he, there does come condemnation, but it's after we've rejected the grace. If you won't take the grace, then all that's left is condemnation, right? But man, he comes with John 3:16, for God so loved the world. Mm-hmm. He didn't come to condemn the world, he came to save the world. Yeah. And so that is a beautiful message, and we do that we give that grace to people. You and I have a chance, others have a chance to bring grace and to say, what does it look like for me to say, you're okay, God loves you. Some things need to change. We need to fix some things. But you know what? Let's start with the fact that he cares about you right now.
Yeah. And so many guys, And girls. I think about the guys, but so many guys have not experienced that in their lives.
Not at all.
They've not had a father or anyone who says, I love you, I'm proud of you. And
those words are gold.
And they've not had anyone pull them aside, put their arm around them, pray over them. I remember being with a missionary when our first international trip. The missionary who we were visiting in South Asia said, I have never heard my father pray for me, and to my knowledge, he has never prayed for me. And this is one of our missionaries and serving in a hard place. And so there's so many guys that are hungry for that. George, and we could go on and on, but for the sake of time, if someone has been listening to this and saying, you know what, I really need to be investing in someone else, that this whole idea of calling that George started with is speaking to me, and I feel like that part of what my calling is at this point in my life is to invest some time, like the good steward, invest some time, some resources, some energy in mentoring, discipling someone else. Where do they go? How do they get started? I know what that looks like at Parkway. They can come see you. They would talk to staff there. But what does it look like for someone who is stirred by this conversation?
That's good. That's a good thought. Well, pastor of your church is going to know a ton of people are hurting. If he's any kind of pastor at all, he's going to know. His finger's going to be on the pulse of a lot of folks that are struggling. And you could say, who could I bless? Yep. So I would say that's a great place to go to your pastor and just say, I may not be any good at this, but I want to invest in somebody's life. What would you recommend for me? Yeah. So I would definitely start with that. Do it in the context of the church. Yeah. So often a lot of the things that we get excited about as Christians, and we end up doing it off as a tangent. It has nothing to do with our church life, and then we wonder why we feel so disconnected. The church needs to be the place where we do stuff as much as we can. It's not to say you can't do anything outside the church, but I would strongly recommend do something that blesses your church, and so start there. The other side of that would be, first of all, just do an inventory of yourself. We really need to, we talked about you need to receive before you can give. Well, you don't necessarily have to have someone mentor you for you to mentor somebody else, right? But you need to get to a place of gratitude. Yeah. For me, like dealing with that tremendous loss in my life just a few years ago, the way forward for me, it was very simple, but it was profound, was God said, I want you to be grateful. I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you can bemoan the fact that you've lost this, this, and this, that you no longer have that companion with you day by day. But George, I want you to think about, what did you have? Yeah. What did I give you for 41 years? What kind of relationship were you able to have, and walk through that? And when I started going down that, oh my gosh, I began to go, I have been incredibly blessed. Yeah. I think there's a lot of things that are hidden in our lives that if we'll just take the time to reflect, we can see ways to be grateful. I realize people have been through mess. They've been through a lot of hard things. But part of that is that, we have an enemy that wants to make us forget the blessings and the ways that God has been working in our life, because here you are. You could be, you could be in the dump. You could be as an addict on the side of the road. You could be dead, you know what I mean? And I could have easily been in all those. In my life, I can see how, unless for the grace of God, I could be here, here, or here, and none of those were good places. Right. You know what I mean? And so when I start realizing the things he's done to intervene in my life, it's all of a sudden gratitude wells up. And when you're grateful, oh my gosh, it changes everything. Yeah. Now you're ready. Yeah. Now you're ready to bless somebody else. Doesn't mean you have to have all the answers. Doesn't mean you have to know the Bible from one end to the other. It just means you're ready to go on that journey with somebody else because you're in a position of strength now. Right.
And the enemy wants to keep us so busy that we don't even stop long enough to feel those things. And he wants to keep our head down, focused on the troubles that we're dealing with, so that we don't lift our head up to see where our help comes from.
And the opportunities all around you. Yeah. Like the young man I told you that's a first responder. I mean, he's reached a place where he goes, I need to think more about than just doing my job, taking care of my wife, making ends meet, da-da-da-da. And he's not adding something immense to his schedule. He's just waking up and realizing, what's the opportunity in front of me? Because, your life is made of choices. What are you choosing to invest in? And no offense, but, you can stare at a TV and watch baseball all day long if you want to. And there's times when that's a good thing to do. You need to relax, just chill. But, if that's my life, that's my leisure life, how could I leverage that for more important things that are valuable? And let me just tell you, invest in somebody else's life, it's priceless.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely priceless.
Yeah.
It's what gets you up in the morning and then what you go to bed at night with a smile on your face.
The greatest joy is investing in someone else.
Yeah.
And if you're a dad, start by investing in your own home, but look for those opportunities beyond your home as well in the workplace and so forth. So, well, George, anything else to share with folks? Or, man, we could go on and on.
We could.
Yeah, and we'll finish some conversation here, but I'll go ahead and cut it short. I'll put some links into a couple of things that we mentioned here. I just received, you'll be familiar with this, Masterlife. Lifeway has put out a new version of Masterlife.
Oh my, here we go.
And I don't think anything has changed except for the font. I mean, it's Avery's old stuff, but that's what someone took me through.
Right.
And that was programmatic, but it set me up for understanding what does it look like to walk out my faith.
I like free.
Yeah.
Honestly, and I'll just tell you what we're doing at our church with this ministry site. We're putting everything online.
Yeah.
And some of it's like videos and other things, so we don't own the copyright, but we can link to it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So it's going to be out there.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you, before you spend enormous amounts of money to do some kind of thing, let's look at what's freely available. Sure, there's some fantastic resources that are worth a few bucks to go ahead and pay for it, but I just would rather you go start somewhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can always come back and do others, but just think like a missionary. A missionary says, I don't have a lot of money. I don't have much resource. I just need to get with this person.
Start with Mark.
And I got the Bible.
Yeah.
The Bible's your greatest friend in the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Empowered by the Holy Spirit. So, well, George, thank you for being with us. And man, for the conversation, it's just so rich. It inspires me all the time. And folks, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Noble Man Podcast. It's been rich and robust. And listen, if the Lord has spoken to you at all, don't sit there and let that flame go out. Get started. Go talk to your pastor. Say, who can I invest in? But as George said, start with doing an inventory of what you're grateful for, and make sure that you understand how the Lord has blessed you, so that you can pour out those blessings on other folks. Be a conduit of blessing for other folks. So, folks, again, thank you for joining us for this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one. God bless you.